Hi class, in this recording we are going to focus on the small intestine, both its anatomy and its histology. So let's dive into it. Here in Visible Body, I'm going to go ahead and go back to our default alimentary canal view, and we can see how there's the main functions or organs of the alimentary canal shown here. We're going to focus on the small intestine as a whole. It's called the small intestine not because of its length, but because of its width or cross-sectional diameter. The cross-sectional diameter of this tube is much narrower than the cross-sectional diameter of the large intestine, highlighted here. So even though the large intestine physically is shorter, it's also much wider, hence its namesake. So here we have the small intestine. I'm going to go ahead and remove the large intestine just because it's in the way. It messes up our view. So here we can see the small intestine. It's broken up into three regions. The first region is the duodenum of the small intestine, or duodenum as it's sometimes pronounced. And the middle region is called the jejunum of the small intestine. And then finally, we have the ileum, the last portion of the small intestine. So it's broken up into three main chunks. Notably, the ileum of the small intestine is going to drain chyme into the cecum of the large intestine. So to bring the large intestine back, here we have the ileum, and the ileum of the small intestine is going to connect and drain directly into the cecum of the large intestine. Now, notably, we have a valve, a one-way valve here. This ileocecal valve is going to help prevent the feces of the large intestine from flowing backwards into the small intestine. I'm going to go ahead and hide the cecum here, just to better expose the ileum. And that ileocecal valve is not showing up very nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and first I'll hit the undo button to re-expose the cecum. There we go. Ileocecal valve, show me. There we go. Now we can see it. So here we have that ileocecal valve. Notably, it will be used for one-way transport. It's going to prevent substances from going backwards. We don't want the bacteria of our feces to get into the chyme of the small intestine. Let's pause for a moment and look at some histology. Let's pause. So we'll go here to Histology Guide. As we look at the small intestine, a notable structure of the small intestine, and I really prefer this view over here, are these large extensions going upwards. These are referred to as the villi, and that's the plural term. And these villi, if we zoom in on them, actually let's pause for a moment. Before I zoom in on the villi, I want to show you the villi in a microanatomy view here within Visible Body. So if I go to microanatomy and then click on intestinal villi, we can see the same structure right here as this large region that goes up and over. There we go. Of course it highlighted the whole thing. So the intestinal villi is this region that goes up and over. There we go. The intestinal villi highlighted. And if I zoom in on the intestinal villi, I can see that it's covered with a simple columnar epithelium. That simple columnar epithelium is going to be made up of enterocytes. Entero meaning digestive. Another name for the enterocyte is the absorptive cells. And those are going to be the most common cells of the villi, the most common cell types of that simple columnar epithelium. We also have goblet cells interspersed to produce some mucus to help protect our small intestine. And we can see those goblet cells as those bright white regions in between the enterocytes. And if not shown here is the microvilli. So we can't see the microvilli here in this visible body view, but if I zoom in at maximum zoom, you can see how there's a band along the surface of the cell, and we really need a much higher power microscope. This band that I'm just tracing perfectly, unfortunately my stylus completely covers it up, that band is made up of microvilli. And the absorptive cells will have those microvilli present on them. So that is the villus. Let's talk about the intestinal crypts and the lacteals. So as we are looking at the intestinal crypts, those are the invaginations of the intestinal wall of the small intestine. So we can see that here in visible body. And then in a photomicrograph, if I zoom out, oh, I hit the space bar again. My bad. We can see the intestinal crypts right here as the invaginations in between the villi of the small intestine. And that is it for our there's one last thing. I even had it highlighted, the lacteal. The lacteal is very clearly visible here in the visible body view. It is a small lymphatic capillary that we use to absorb lipids within our small intestine. Amino acids, monosaccharides, and nucleic acids can all be absorbed into the blood capillaries of the villus, but lipids need to be absorbed into the lymphatic capillary, the lacteal of the villus, to be processed by the lymphatic system before we can utilize those lipids. That's all we have for the anatomy and histology of the small intestine. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them on the class discussion boards or shoot me an email. And as always, happy studies.